This is Chris Knight reporting for WRFI Community Radio News. I'm here with Ritz Deutch, who is the coordinator for the local chapter of Amnesty International. Uta just returned from the Northeast Regional Conference for Amnesty International. Uta, can you tell us a little bit about what the theme for that conference was this year, and a little bit about what you think came out of it?
Yes, so this year the theme was The Power of Us. And it was a wonderful event. We met at Boston. So for the Northeast Regional Conference, it's a one-day event. It's a one-day conference, from morning to evening. We had 3 separate panels, but we also had about 10 workshops in the morning, 10 workshops in the afternoon. But what was really great is we had a lot of young people turn out. Overall, we had over 500 people in attendance. So that was quite a bit larger than the crowd we had last year. And a lot of them young people. So we have a lot of people from student groups, either at high school or then from college student groups. So there's a lot of, energy and a lot of enthusiasm. So that was really, I think, the best part. It was just great to see so many young people. And we've had some inspirational speakers. So we had, we often hear from people who were political prisoners, prisoners of conscience, who were sitting in jail sometimes for many, many years. And because of letter writing campaigns that Amnesty International participated in, and sometimes other organizations as well, people were released, or some people were no longer tortured once the letters started to come in. So it's great then when you go to an event like that and you hear from people who were imprisoned and, what we do at Amnesty made such a huge difference in their life. And that's always very inspirational. So coming out of it, I'm always really charged up and, ready to roll.
Yeah. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the new objectives or initiatives that are being looked at by Amnesty International for the next year, and maybe even further out into the future. What's going to be the focus of your work regionally as well as locally here in Ithaca?
So with Amnesty, we always have several campaigns that that we highlight. We have some long-standing campaigns that we've been working on for seemingly forever. So, for example, death penalty abolition is one of our major campaigns. We often work on behalf of individual prisoners, and that is basically the work that we started with in 1961 when the organization was first founded. So we still have, we always have political prisoners on whose behalf we fight. But in recent years, what Amnesty International USA has taken on is fighting against the way the war on terror has been conducted. So it's basically issues involving prisoners at Guantanamo Bay. It's also issues involving drones. It's also issues involving the domestic spying program. So that's one of our major campaigns. But we work on a variety of issues. So the Violence Against Women Act was important to get that passed here in the United States. But now there is an International Violence of Women Act that we're trying to encourage Congress to support. Every December 10th is International Human Rights Day. So we always have a global write-a-thon, either on that day, so a lot of groups organize on that day, or throughout that week. So the write-a-thon actually, goes for an entire week. And every year we have around a dozen cases that people write letters for, So most of the time it is advocating for individuals, for prisoners. And in the past, oftentimes during this campaign, maybe tens of thousands of letters get generated on behalf of one person worldwide. And it has led to the release of prisoners. So every year we seem to have success to, getting at least one person released. And that's great because it's a global write-a-thon. So it's not just here in the United States, or it's not just here in Ithaca, but it really is a global event. So our group is definitely going to participate in the write-a-thon this year. We're also looking to collaborate with other groups around the issue of solitary confinement. So we're working with some groups that are involved in prisoner justice issues and issues of detention. So that's always very important for us. But so a lot of things, a lot of the cases get generated, and of course a lot of it is based on research and whether or not we have quote unquote boots on the ground, in other countries to get research. But the research, the background briefing that gets generated then often leads to either urgent actions or then more sustained actions. So some of that is generated on the international level, and some of these cases come out from the International Secretariat. But then the national sections also have their priority campaigns. And then, of course, locally, because this is really a grassroots organization, a lot of it is decided locally. So whatever our group locally is interested in, so that is pretty much member generated. So some of our group members are interested in prison issues, so we're working on that. Some of our members are interested in immigration issues, and I'm also one of them. We're also very interested in what goes on in Mexico. So, for example, people working in migrant shelters and so on. So whoever is interested in a particular topic will then bring that to the table. And, we basically make a decision then what kind of events we want to have and what the capacity of the group is. But it is in that sense very much grassroots, very much democratically driven, if you will. And that's really wonderful. There's a lot of power there. But if we do align ourselves with let's say the write-a-thon, and if we write on those specific cases, or if we do work on cases that are coordinated nationally, we can then get a lot of support materials, so that's kind of important as well. But it's not as if a local group is just restricted to working on the issues that come out of the national office. So there's a lot of power that we have on the grassroots level, which is great.
How many years have you been working with Amnesty International, and how many years have you been going to this conference?
So I was passively supporting Amnesty International for some time, meaning, I sent them my annual contribution and I thought it's great what they do. But in terms of active involvement, I finished my dissertation in 2008. And before that, all my energy was invested in just trying to get that done. So I became actively involved in Amnesty once I had that behind me. So 2008, actually we had... I received an invitation from Wales Brown, who's our treasurer, inviting me to our annual fundraiser, the Ithaca chapter annual fundraiser, which gets mailed out to hundreds of people. So I went to that and met a whole bunch of people, and that was basically what hooked me, and I started going to the monthly meetings. We do incidentally have our fundraiser coming up this Sunday again, so it's always this time of year. I started going to monthly meetings, and we always meet every third Tuesday of the month. And then within a year or so, some of the members in the group asked me if I wanted to be coordinator. So then I took on the role of coordinator, and then a year or two later I was asked whether or not I was willing to join the Northeast Regional Planning Group, and then not too long ago I was asked if I would be willing to be an area coordinator for upstate New York. So these things they kind of, well, I don't want to say they fall into my lap, but people approach me and then I find it very difficult to say no. But
Well, I was just curious about how you've seen the group change over the past couple of years. You mentioned when we were speaking earlier about how there were some financial troubles in 2008, as many of us were experiencing financial troubles. And but then this year you saw a lot more influx of young people and some new faces, and maybe you can talk about that change and why you think that's important.
Yeah, so this is happening on several different levels. So nationally, uh, Amnesty International USA has been experiencing financial difficulties, as a consequence of 2008, and we actually lost a lot of our paid staff in the national and regional offices. So that was a difficult transition, and of course, a lot of the work then had to be picked up by volunteer leaders, which is also one reason I think why I got roped into more and more work as time went on. But I think we went through a major restructuring at the national level, and we now once again were able to hire new staff. So we're not quite at the level that we had previously with staffing, but we're definitely not as bad off as we were a year ago. So that makes a huge difference when you organize these big conferences like we just did in Boston. Last year we had only one paid staff member, and most of it was organized through volunteers, especially the regional planning group. This year we had two paid staff members, and we had a lot of interns and student leaders who stepped up and did the nuts and bolts of the organizing. So we definitely, I think, turned the corner as far as the USA organization goes. Locally, actually, we didn't experience that as acutely because the Ithaca chapter is in a unique situation that a lot of people are conscientious of human rights and social justice issues. So even though we don't have a lot of people who necessarily come to our monthly meetings, we do have a lot of people who receive our monthly newsletter, and we do have a lot of people who then contribute financially. So locally, our chapter was not as hard hit financially, and we were able to weather it. So every year, we do manage to raise enough funds to cover our mass mailings. So, I mean, letter writing is what we do, right? And we do send out the monthly newsletter. So most of our cost is really related to postage and printing and mailing and so on. That's where most of it goes. But we've been lucky in that so far we have been able to raise as much money as we need. I mean, the changes that I saw in the Boston conference, that was just wonderful because last year we were still sort of in the pains of this transition, trying to deal with the restructuring of the organization and so on. And I think we might have had maybe 350 people who turned out, but this past weekend we had over 500 people who turned out, and many of them, in my estimation, maybe half or more came for the very first time. So these are young student leaders, and that was just wonderful. And because people had a very positive experience, it was really a very upbeat conference. That then makes a big difference, as people are just getting introduced into the movement, how good they feel about the organization, how good they feel about doing human rights work, and whether or not that enthusiasm can then be sustained long term. I mean, that's ultimately our goal. We do have students in high school and in college who are active, but oftentimes what happens when they graduate is they may not show up in a local chapter, right? I mean, people move around, people have changes, professionally in their lives. So that's always been a challenge for us to sort of make sure that students, once they graduate, are still then going to be active in the movement. So I'm always very happy to see young people who are enthusiastic, and I'm always hoping that they're going to be lifetime activists. And of course, with our local chapter here in Ithaca, many of them have been activists since the 1960s and 70s, so they're getting up there in age. So it's definitely very important for us to have, young people in the movement.
Ritz Deutch is the local coordinator for the chapter of Amnesty International in Ithaca. and she's also a regular contributor to WRFI Community Radio. Uta, thank you so much for speaking with us on WRFI Community Radio News.
Thanks so much, Chris. And don't forget, I also have a human rights program every Friday from 4 to 5 with Chantal Thomas, Human Rights and Social Justice. So thanks for tuning in.